And there are new reports tonight from the British Defense Ministry that Russian forces are withdrawing from key areas around Kyiv. Jeff Paul, live on the ground in Lviv. Jeff, what's the latest?
Yeah, Todd, Russia claimed this week that they'd be pulling out troops from cities like Kyiv and Chernihiv as a way to establish mutual trust with these ongoing peace talks. And after a few days of what seemed like more intense fighting in those cities, officials here on the ground say it does now appear there is evidence of a withdrawal. And that's clear by some of the images that we're seeing coming out of the Kyiv region as Ukrainian forces push back any Russian forces that remain in the area. And in fact, some officials on the ground tonight saying that Kyiv has been liberated. But Ukrainian forces are still skeptical of this pullback, and that's for good reason. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky believes Russian forces have created a catastrophic situation, especially for folks coming back to the city. He's warning folks not to return because Russia has placed mines around homes, on abandoned equipment, and even on the bodies of those who have been killed. U.S. officials and Ukrainian officials also say there's the possibility of redeployment in the area and in some cases a rerouting of Russian troops to the east.
They are withdrawing troops in certain areas, probably in order to strengthen the grouping of the occupying forces for further offensive operations in Slobodansky, Donetsk and Lugansk areas.
Now, in the besieged city of Mariupol, more than 100,000 civilians remain trapped from the outside world. There are very little resources there to sustain life in that coastal city at the moment. And when agencies like the Red Cross try to enter the city to bring in aid or to rescue people, so far they have been on a wide scale very unsuccessful. So it's leaving people who are in Mariupol to risk their own lives to try to get through all that Russian shelling and the Russian troops who are out there right now just to get to safer cities, in particular to western Ukraine, like where we're at here in Lviv. Todd?
Jeff Paul, thank you very much. You mentioned the rerouting of troops to the east. There's concern, isn't there, that this is all part of a Russian strategy, a new strategy, if you will, in light of their failure so far in the bulk of the country to really split Ukraine in two. One, an area to the east that Russia controls, and then two, an area to the west that Ukraine holds onto. Is that the sense that you're getting on the ground?
Well, it would seem like a strategic move here to sort of create this land corridor that many of us have been talking about here. Russian forces right now are in Crimea, which Ukrainian officials still considered an occupied territory that's essentially there. So they're trying to kind of connect everything from the east all the way down from Mariupol along the coast and also control, the coastal port towns along the Black Sea.
Hey, Jeff, Laura Trump here. Just wondering, I feel like for so many of us watching from around the world, it's really felt like that Russia was far overestimated in this war, and Ukraine was very, very much underestimated, especially when we hear things like the fact that Russia is retreating. Of course, that could be a false flag, at least from certain areas. What is the general sentiment from folks on the ground? Do they feel the same way? Do the Ukrainian people feel like they were underestimated and that they far outperformed expectations?
I think that's sort of the feeling in general for Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. They've dealt with the Russians for quite a long time, and it's something they've had to fight for and now are continuing to fight for, even as recent as 2014 in dealing with Crimea. And now you have their entire country being invaded by Russian forces. So there's a lot of fight to them. They're a very proud people. And, of course, they're going to great lengths to protect their freedom and their way of life.
What up, Jeff? Tyrus here, man. First of all, how are you holding up?
Oh, it pales in comparison to what these people are going through right now, Tyrus. It really does.
You know, when I kind of get that weird gut feeling when I'm looking at this, the withdrawal seems kind of, I'm very skeptical of it is for peace. Is there any talk on the ground or any fear that the reason this might be for maybe a chemical attack or possible nuclear attack, that there's troops suddenly are falling back? Are they concerned about the distance of how far they're falling back? Is there any concern of that?
That's certainly been a topic of discussion, that when you pull troops out, something else is going to be coming back in. There's also the concern of just doubling down or bringing in troops from elsewhere around Russia to come back in. And but I think it underscores really we don't know where this is going. There's only one person who truly knows what's going to happen next, and that's Vladimir Putin.
Hi, Jeff. Lisa Booth here. Appreciate the work you're doing. You know, as a reporter in the fog of war, how do you get to the truth? I mean, there's just so much propaganda. Obviously, if you're Russia, you want the perception that you're doing better than you are. If you're Ukraine, you want to get more Western involvement. You want the U.S. to be more involved. We also have an administration that recently lied to us about a drone attack in Afghanistan, telling us that it took out a terrorist when, in fact, it was an aid worker and children. So how do you get to the truth in the environment that we're operating in?
It's difficult, and part of it, too, is the distance, especially where we're at, because a lot of the fighting is happening in the east, and we're, of course, in the west. And I think this is when you really rely upon your fellow colleagues out in the field and your trusted other associates and reporters, and especially the fixers and the people here who call Ukraine home, who are working with us right now. You really have to lean on them, and you have to be cautious about what you're reporting and what it really means, sort of reading in between the lines to sometimes find that truth.
Jeff, you and all of our teams there in Ukraine doing an amazing job. Thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for joining us this evening. Jeff Paul, live in Lviv.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.